Domo Aji Publishing presents There's a Smuggler in the Family by Jim Rathbone. Read by Alex Rudy. Chapter 1. Time for Change. Will strode purposely toward the boatyard after his morning meeting with several merchants. He had a lot on his mind and much to do. Still dressed in what he called his peacock clothes, he was anxious to shed the itchy wool, bathe, and change into his cotton clothing and get comfortable. He just cleared the corner of a building, not 100 yards from the Braithwaite boatyard, when someone collided with him. At first, Will thought it accidental, until the man's hand snaked around his cloak and clumsily picked the purse from his belt. "Begging your pardon, sire," the man said in a squeaky voice, and quickly turned to walk away. Will's foot snapped out and caught the man in the back of his knee, buckling his leg, stopping him in his tracks. He turned, and with great indignation exclaimed, "Here now, that ain't very gentlemanly. I did apologize." "Neither is it gentlemanly to pick my purse, sir. Please return it." Will smiled. The man turned and began to run, but Will's foot caught his leg with a side snap kick. The pickpocket's knee buckled, and he went down hard. Coming up fast at Will, he pulled a rusty old blade and took a wide swing at Will's face. A stern look appeared on Will's face as he stepped forward inside the arc of the knife and executed double blades, followed by a head-turn throw. Both Will's hands hit him at the same time, striking the radial nerve in the forearm and bicep. The man's arm went numb, and the rusty knife clattered to the ground. Will grabbed his right wrist with his left hand as his right slid up, and with a chop of his hand, he made contact with his attacker's jaw, stunning him slightly. He checked the power of his strike so as not to render the pickpocket unconscious. Will wanted him awake for the discussion that was to follow. Will's right hand grabbed the hair on the back of his opponent's head, pushed his head down, pulling him forward while lifting his right arm, dropping the man none too neatly onto his back. Picking up the knife, he knelt on the pickpocket's chest and placed the blade under his right eye with just enough pressure to prick the skin. A drop of blood appeared, along with a real fear in his opponent's eyes. Will smiled down at what he could now see was only a boy of about 13 years of age. He was tall and lean, with bones showing in his face, and said, "You must find another line of endeavor, son. You're not qualified for this profession. Explain yourself." Will grabbed his hair again, forced the boy to maintain eye contact, and looked for any slight dilation of the pupils that would put a lie to the boy's explanation. The boy began to sputter. "Sorry, sir, I would have never... But me dad died of the fever afore I could apprentice. Me mum's so sick now, I think she's a-dying. The bloody doctor won't come to see her without me having the money. We're struggling not to starve. I had no choice. Honest, I didn't." Will could tell the boy was telling the truth. He took his purse from the boy's pocket and opened it. "Here. Take these coins and go aboard that boat over there," pointing to a ship in the dock across the street, and handed him 3 shillings. "Ask for my man Li, and show him these 3 coins, and tell him about your mum. He'll get you fed while someone sees to your mum. You can keep the 3 shillings. By the way, what's your name?" "Davy, sir." "Davy what?" "Davy Cooper, sir. My father was a tradesman, sir, afore he died. We's honest folk." His voice trailed away. "That's okay, Davy. We've all seen hard times. Can you read and write?" "I can write me name," Davy said proudly. "But no, sir, not so much." "Would you like to learn a trade?" "Oh, yes, sir, more than anything." "Okay, Davy, do as you're told and go aboard now and see my man Lee. He'll set you up." Will watched as the boy walked away, and he thought about how many other of their lot had joined the Timble family and Timble company from just such adverse conditions. He knew his man Li, really Mai Li, in her little old Chinese man disguise, would immediately go to see the boy's mother. If anyone could help her, it would be Mai Li, using her extensive knowledge of Chinese medicines. Her knowledge and skill was far advanced of current medical knowledge in Britain. Mai Li and her medical skills had saved Will's life on several occasions and would probably do so again. He shook himself back to reality, walked the 100 yards to the boatyard, and up the plank onto the deck of the ship he was refitting. Several days later, Will Timble sat on the deck of the ship, the Mary May, named after the wife of the owner, Lord Braithwaite. The new seaman, former would-be pickpocket, Davy Cooper, walked up to him, head hanging. "Sir, may I have a word, sir?" "Begging your pardon, sir, but you got some funny rules to be followed for a man to be working for ya. I never heard of no one not drinking water unless it's boiled. But I talked with the mate, and he says your ways are sound." "But, sir, a bath? My God, it's still winter. A man could catch his death. That man Lee wanted me to take off all my clothes and sit in hot water, sir." "Ship rules must be followed, and you'll become accustomed to the bathing. You'll find the hot water quite nice once you get used to it," Will said with a laugh in his voice. "How's your mother, Davy?" "She's doing much better, sir. Your man Lee gave her some special tea to drink each day. She was out of bed half the day yesterday." After Davy left, Will sat thinking, daydreaming, and wondering. America. What would it be like? If the stories were to be half believed, there would be wild savage Indians and the like, and timber as far as the eye could see. Timber for ships, and that interested Will Timble. Will was in charge of the refit of the Mary May. The refit, designed by Will and his father, William Timble Sr., would convert a portion of the cargo ship to carry passengers. He was converting several sections of the hold to small cabins for the transport of the Timble family to their new home in the American colonies. Will sat in the shade of a sail, the working drawings laid out in front of him. He was directing workmen loading wood sections and bulkhead partitions that would be the walls of the new cabins. The new partitions were built by the Timble Coach Company, one of the new family businesses now headed by Will's adopted younger brother, Edward Timble. Edward had been a London street urchin whose only name was Rags before being adopted into the Timble family. He apprenticed and became a fine craftsman. It seemed to be a habit of the Timble family to pick up strays. They adopted street kids. 3 family members had come from the mean streets of London or Bristol. One of the carpenters came on deck and approached Will. "If you please, sir, come below for a moment and show us exactly how we're supposed to set them last 2 sections. They don't seem to fit," he said, as he continually shifted back and forth, not looking directly at Will. Will got to his feet and followed the man below, taking a roll of the working drawings with him. Since it was his design, within seconds of looking, he instructed, "Just reverse them. That one goes on this side, and this one goes over there." "Sorry, sir. I should have seen that myself." "Just keep up the good work. Don't hesitate to come to me with any problems. It's the reason I sit on this deck all day long, and I don't mind at all. This job must be done correctly the first time. We don't have time to do it twice." Will tried to explain left and right sections, but the carpenter couldn't understand his instructions. Finally, Will took a piece of chalk and traced his left hand on the section that would be installed on the left side of the passageway. He traced his right hand on the section that was to be installed on the right side. Then he showed the workmen how to place their own hands into the traced hand so they could know on which side of the ship to install the bulkhead. He marked a big arrow to show which side went forward after they turned one around the wrong direction. Will went back on deck, sat down at the table, and stared at the plans, not really seeing them. He sat there thinking over the last year or so, and how things developed from a simple business venture to the idea of a tea import business, to the idea of actually relocating the Timble family to Philadelphia in the American colony of Pennsylvania. Will wasn't sure exactly when the decision to go to the American colonies had been made, or all the factors that had to be considered in such a course change for the Timble family. Of course, there were the politics of Bristol these days. Doing business was more of a bother, but that was only one aspect. One of the main factors that made the final decision easier was the inexpensive transportation at hand in the form of a seaworthy vessel. The Mary May was a reliable vessel, which had completed the long journey a number of times. The sturdy cargo vessel was loaned in exchange for stock in the new venture by Lord Braithwaite's company and Lord Braithwaite. In addition, the family invested many months of hard work, producing goods to fill the remaining holds. The goods would be offered for sale once they set up business in their new home. The machinery required to build a new forge and blast furnace for the Timble business in the colonies would be fabricated, crated, and loaded aboard a vessel. Space would be leased on 2 additional merchant ships to carry additional machinery produced by William Timble and his laborers. These cast steel parts, made in their own foundry, would complete the machinery for a new water wheel and power transmission system. This would be the foundation of the new manufacturing business. These gears, shafts, and pulleys would be packed in most of the cargo space of the 2 ships. Will understood his father and Lord Braithwaite discussed ventures into this new business frontier, but neither man, because of their advancing age, saw themselves in the role of traveler. They would depend on Will to find and manage the craftsmen and labor, and then make the long journey. Will knew he would be sailing to the American colonies and beyond, not as a privateer this time, but as a merchant. Although Will thought there was little difference in the 2 professions. The event that affected the most drastic changes in the Timble family happened in early May of that year. Lord Braithwaite and Will's father, William, had been talking on a warm Sunday afternoon. They had been walking about his rose garden, relaxing and enjoying the nice spring day, the first clear day in some time. His lordship just finished a sentence about the increased cost of his ships due to the rising price of good wood. He turned, looked at William, and said in a small voice, "Oh my," and dropped. William sent a runner for Mai Li, but by the time she arrived, there was nothing that could be done. Lord Braithwaite's personal physician, a rotund man with a ruddy complexion, showed up about 1.5 hours later. He came in huffing and puffing, but all he did was confirm what they all knew by that time. William's longtime friend and mentor was gone. The sudden death of his close friend really upset William. For several weeks, William couldn't think about business or plans for the future. He spent his time at the forge in front of the heat, hammering out his sorrow on the anvil and iron, as if sweat and hard work could cure his deep grief and loss. Slowly, the demands of family and the normalcy of everyday life that went on day to day drew William from his mourning. Will and his family began to talk of following through with Lord Braithwaite's plan to build a cartage business to support the new trade company based in the American colonies and trading in China. Discussions and planning began again. Will's father, William, now almost 60 years of age, never considered leaving Britain, even though he had turned over the day-to-day operations of his forges to Will's childhood friend, Bastien Giselle Cordell, or Bass as he was known. After many years, they met again on a pirate ship 1,000 miles from home in the Caribbean. Will still called Bass my friend, the pirate. The encounter took place a short time after Will set out on a crown-chartered privateering vessel sponsored by Lord Braithwaite. He barely cleared port on his new assignment when he was conscripted by a Royal Navy vessel. They were in need of a competent shipwright, so he was forced aboard to work as a carpenter. Just as they sailed into Caribbean waters, they were attacked by pirates. One of those pirates was Will's childhood friend, Bass. Together they outwitted, outsmarted, and extricated themselves from a horde of bloodthirsty scallywags. They sailed through a hurricane and were shipwrecked and stranded. They cobbled together a ship from their wreck and pieces of others that had washed ashore. It took years for them to make it back to England, but they did return home with quite a bit of booty. His original employer, Lord Braithwaite, helped them avoid, shall we say, legal complications, which involved changes in the laws during their time away, and England making peace with Spain. Any privateer, after a certain date, was now a pirate. The king would have confiscated all the booty and hung Will and Bass as pirates. Everyone in the family contributed ideas for the new venture. New Lynn, another of their adopted waifs, discussed with Will the idea of a step kiln to create pottery similar to the pottery New Lin's family produced in China. Mai Li and New Lin could fire local clays and produce many different products, from dinner plates to chamber pots and transport jugs of all sizes. This would provide an extra income for New Lin, other than her millinery shop they planned for the silks brought back from Mai Li's home in Canton. They felt the jugs and containers they could produce in the kiln from local clays would have an excellent market, which would complement by providing containers for merchants that had goods to ship. These ideas, added to those, set out in the overall business plan designed by his lordship. The earthenware pottery produced could be sold to retail merchants throughout the colonies, as well as to packers and manufacturers. The entire family worked on the design of the new venture, which would include a coach and wagon manufacturing facility to supply their cartage company to transport goods, a blast furnace for casting metals, a shipyard to build the ships, all to support their import business, Timble and Company. They also wanted a family farm designed after Lord Braithwaite's. They read everything they could find on the land available for purchase, in the regions they would consider to set up their new venture. They needed proximity to a navigable river, large enough to supply adequate water power and provide deep water for transporting heavy goods. A quality timber supply would need to be close. All these things had to be considered when choosing the site for their new venture. On the Monday, a fortnight after Lord Braithwaite's passing, William and Will received letters from the firm of White, Witherspoon and Wallace, London solicitors and barristers. The letters announced their representative would be at Lord Braithwaite's farm for the reading and disposition of Lord Braithwaite's will. Both Will and his father's presence were requested, as it stated that each would receive a bequest. Both men felt curious and excited, yet almost guilty. So, upon the appointed day, Will and William dressed in their business peacock costumes, as Will called them. They wore the itchy woolen clothing only when they were required to meet with customers or other merchant men. The rest of the time, the whole family wore cotton clothing, cut in the style of the heavier woolen clothes, but much more comfortable. Will, who had bathed regularly since childhood, could not understand the horror most people felt about bathing. The smell at these gatherings was almost more than he could tolerate. He pulled his father to one side and said, "Maybe we can find a window to open?" William showed he understood by wrinkling his nose. When they entered the office of their lifelong friend, there was a grand new portrait of his lordship, standing with his new ship in the background. Just finished, it hung behind the great old desk where William and his lordship spent so many hours in conversation. His stern visage looked down on the gathered friends and relatives. Lord Braithwaite had changed the lives of William and his family more than any other man. It was a gift of opportunity and the chance to become educated and prosperous. William and Will found chairs near a window and opened it enough to get a small breeze of fresh air into the room. They waited patiently in comfort while the solicitor went through the long list of dispositions dealing with the town and the estate. William had been searching his mind for the reason of his presence there. He did have an unpaid contract for delivered goods, so he thought that must be the reason. Mr. Albion White, Jr., who stood 4 feet 11 inches, thinner than a fence post, and looked older than dirt, was the presiding solicitor. He finally read out William's name and asked him to step forward. William stood and noticed his foot had gone to sleep. He almost fell when he stepped down on a numb foot. He moved slowly forward on legs that felt not too sturdy at the moment. The barrister said in a high, squeaky voice, "You, sir, are Mr. James William Timble, Sr.?" "Yes." The solicitor handed him a waxed-sealed envelope, addressed to William in his lordship's scrawling handwriting. The solicitor also handed William a small purse, which seemed quite heavy for its size, a folder with several stock certificates, and a note against his lordship's account for the contract fee. William started to ask what all these things were, but was cut short when he saw the lifted tiny hand of the solicitor. "Everything I just handed you is explained in this letter, son." So William turned and walked back to his chair. Will was next to be asked to step forward to receive his bequest, and also received a waxed sealed envelope and a heavy purse, several stock certificates, and a note drawn on his lordship's London account. He was also told, "It's all in the letter." Will then returned to his seat. As soon as it was polite, William and Will excused themselves and walked outside away from the crowd of people for a breath of fresh air and some privacy to compose themselves enough to read the letters. William found a seat under a tree where he had spent many hours reading on summer evenings. He broke the seal and opened the letter from his lifelong friend and mentor. "My dear friend William, we have had many good years together as friends and collaborators on projects. It has been my honor to know you. You are truly a humble and honest man. I have never for one moment doubted you would become the best investment I ever made. Our projects together have been profitable for us and many others. Working with you these years has been one of the finest experiences of my life, and has given me a feeling of accomplishment and purpose. The purse you received contains 100 gold sovereigns. It is my hope you will take this small bit of money, build a good library, and with it discover the happiness I gained by giving you some small help. I charge you to find 5 other men, mentor them, and help them to gain the understanding that you have been given. I have also left you my leather-bound book as a trophy of what you have accomplished and a torch to pass on. I believe the notes in the book may also have some practical value in the management of a gentleman's affairs. You will have access to additional funds from the London accounts as I've given into your hands a count of shares enough for your retirement as a gentleman. I hope you will enjoy it as much as I've enjoyed working with you all these years. Ever your friend, David James Edward Braithwaite III. There were tears in William's eyes as he folded the letter and placed it back into the envelope. William opened the small box and removed the small leather-bound notebook that had been his inspiration so many years before. He looked over at his son, sitting, reading his letter, and knew the knowledge was worth much more than gold. However, with the knowledge, he now had gold. He would do as his friend had hoped he would, and build a fine library, and then find and mentor 5 young men, and follow in the footsteps of his friend. Will's letter said, "Dear Will, I have made sure that the stock that was to be yours for the contract we negotiated before the several years you spent away being a pirate has been transferred into your favor. All capital that you entrusted to me upon your return has successfully been transferred to a new account in your favor. All cargo from your voyage to the Caribbean has been converted to coin and also made available in the same account. My solicitors have instructions that title to the ship, Mary May, be transferred to you as my investment, in the new world venture we planned together. The purse holds 100 gold sovereigns for your personal use. Invest it wisely. I am hoping you encourage your father to continue my work. I have felt for some time that he needs a new challenge, one less strenuous than the forge, and I have endeavored to give him one. I'm sure he'll share my letter to him with you. Please contact my barrister, John Fitzgerald, in Philadelphia, upon your arrival in the colonies. He'll arrange with Strahan's friend, the Philadelphia printer, who handles land purchases for the Penn colony. I have placed options on several parcels for new ventures. There are also 2 buildings, one in Boston and one in Philadelphia, that may be used for offices or sales. Fitzgerald has my instructions that the titles for these properties will pass to you upon your arrival and final payment. From his description, I believe they will provide the best locations for your enterprises. Good luck. Ever your friend, David James Edward Braithwaite III. Oh yes, there is also included some gold for your manservant, additional wages for the services to the company and to my family over these many years. This reference to his manservant was an inside joke about Mai Li, the young Chinese girl who had been dressed as a boy when Will's father had rescued her from a slave trader. Will's father had purchased what he thought to be a young boy for the princely sum of 3 shillings, thinking he would free and educate him, only to find the next day that she was not only not a boy, but in fact a fully grown and well-educated woman. Mai Li became part of the family, teaching the Timble family Chinese ways of eating and good health. She became Will's nanny, later his sifu, or teacher, of secret knowledge from the 8 books of fate and wisdom. By the time Will was 8, he could read and write Chinese and had translated most of the text of these ancient books. From these books, Mai Li taught him White Tiger Chuan Fa, a vicious ancient martial art. The skills he gained came in quite handy over the years. Incredible, thought Will. His mind began to race at the possibilities he now had. He couldn't wait to speak with his father and the rest of the family. His mind danced. He would sell the stock immediately and build 2 more ships. He would use the new Dutch design. The new French design. The designs he and Lord Braithwaite had been discussing only a few weeks ago. Now the family could afford these 3 ships, fully loaded with the makings of the Timble's new venture into the colonies, and enough gold to keep them going until production and markets could be brought to profitable levels. Will, Mai Li, Edward, and Nu Lin were in the small apartment above the old bakery where Nu Lin now lived. It was the same apartment where Will had been born many years earlier. Nu Lin decided upon coming of age that she wished to have her own home. She had been a runaway slave living on the streets of London when Will and Mai Li found her. To her, this small apartment was a palace. Under the tutelage of Mai Li, Nu Lin grew up and became a fine seamstress with many regular customers. Below her apartment, the old bakery was now her millinery shop, and more convenient for her small business than living with the rest of the Timble family at the main house away from town. Now, Nu Lin's millinery shop thrived in the old bakery. The Timble family had purchased the building from the old baker, Mr. Stockton, when he decided to retire after the death of his wife, who did most of the hard work anyway. Mr. Stockton thought his daughter and son-in-law would take over the bakery, but they moved to London, so he agreed to sell the property to William. Mai Li and Nu Lin were discussing the different possibilities of moving to the colonies and the plans the family had. Nu Lin wasn't sure she wanted to go to sea again, as it held incredibly negative memories for her being transported as a slave from China to England. However, she was still willing to discuss the possibilities and had many ideas to contribute. After much consideration, she finally agreed to sell her shop and accompany Will, Mai Li, and Edward to America. Will, Mai Li, Nu Lin, and Edward spent many hours around the kitchen table and talked of the coming trip to the colonies. Will felt this new land would be a place he could spread his wings and a grand marketplace for the skills of their family. They planned to find and buy land where they would build a large water wheel and power transmission system for manufacturing everything from furniture to the fanciest royal coaches. He read as much information as he could find about the area where they would buy property. It needed to be on a waterway near Philadelphia, but he knew little else from the limited information he could obtain. Before his death, Lord Braithwaite helped them secure options on several properties through his business associate, William Strahan of London, who had a good friend in Philadelphia who handled real estate transactions for the colony. The idea of actually living in the colonies had never been discussed before his lordship's death. The venture into the tea and silk trade in Cathay, also known as China, was the primary topic of all the planning. His lordship had friends among the traders in Canton, and while he had seen great risk, real wealth was there as a reward for the company who had courage and determination. New routes to Cathay had been discovered, and ships of the new designs covered the seas faster each year. Yes, Will thought, now is the time.